So the Jets walk off the Washington Commanders 30-28. Man, where do I even begin? I guess, you know what? The first thing that needs to be said, Greg Zuerlein is an absolute beast. 54 yards to walk off. I don't care who you're playing. I don't care if it's college football. If you're a kicker and you nail a 54-yarder to end the game, my hat goes off to you, right? Greg Zuerlein has been killing it for the Jets all season. He's been bailing the Jets out all season. And because of him, he got the win for this team today. So big props to him. In my opinion, he's been the best kicker in the AFC. He's been outstanding, absolutely outstanding. I think he deserves to be talked about. 100% deserves to be talked about. But with that said, the Jets advance to 6-9. The Jets win. But somehow, I'm sitting here right now, not confident about the future, not confident in the head coach, not confident in the general manager, right? We had Woody Johnson come out, we had the report come out, I believe it was from Brian Costello, saying that Woody Johnson is saying that, they're not going to make any changes. Hackett's expected to be back, Saleh's expected to be back, along with Joe Douglas. First of all, what's the point of even saying that with 3 games left? You know, if the Jets would have blown this 20-point lead today, could you imagine the headlines? Could you imagine the outrage? I personally would be freaking out right now. It just, the timing of it makes zero sense to begin with. But again, yes, we win. Yes, outstanding day for Garrett Wilson. I thought Breece Hall really put the offense on his back. I felt like at times the offensive line looked a little bit better. Obviously the special teams went out there and did their thing, per usual. The defense went out there. I felt like Jermaine Johnson had a great day. Whether you want to talk about Tony Adams with the pick early, all the incompletions that Howell had, we had the Quincy Williams interception, right? Like the defense, to me, really in the first half, they were playing with their hairs on fire. And I think ultimately, because the Jets are coached so poorly, they allowed Washington to come back in the game, and of course give them credit. The one thing that I was thinking about in the entire second half, once the Commanders scored that second touchdown to get 14 points, I was thinking to myself, you know what? If Washington comes back, if this trend continues and Washington starts to, come back and eventually take the lead, I hope Joe Douglas is front and center. I hope Joe Douglas is front and center. Why? Because Trevor Siemian was completely ineffective today. And do I blame Siemian? No, I don't. We know who Siemian is at this point, at this stage of his career. Now, again, I will give Siemian credit for just, taking the easy check down stuff right at the end of the game. It really seemed like Washington just allowed it was almost like Ron Rivera in the end of that in the end of the game, had the Commanders playing soft, like they were up by 6 or 4 or 5, right? Like the Jets didn't need a field goal. Like, they almost forgot that the Jets just needed 3 to win the game. It made zero sense. They were playing so off, and everybody in the building, everybody watching knew exactly what Siemian was going to do. You go right to the check down immediately out of the shotgun. That's exactly what happened to Breece Hall and whatnot. Siemian just quick little dump offs all the way down the field. They get the field goal in the end. I mean, it makes you think, like, that paired with the stuff that the mistakes early on. I mean, what was Sam Howell? 6 of 22, 2 INTs, no touchdowns. 6 of 22, so many incompletions. You had Jamison Crowder throw the ball up on special teams like random. I've never seen a play like that before. So essentially, you have 3 turnovers. Yeah, it really felt like Washington. Man, their offensive line looked they were getting ripped apart by the Jets' defensive line. It really felt like Washington was giving the game away. I felt like the Jets had it in the bag at halftime, but again, because of coaching, they allowed Washington to enter the game, make it competitive again. But again, going back to the Joe Douglas point, I hope he was front and center. Not only was his guy, Trevor Siemian, the QB that he handpicked weeks after the Rodgers injury, out there looking pretty ineffective, but the Washington Commanders came back in the game because of a veteran backup quarterback. You can make an argument if Brissett started that game from the get-go, Washington would have won. Washington, the 4-win Commanders that are set to blow it up, set to fire Ron Rivera, set to have a high pick in the draft, would have won that football game because of a veteran backup quarterback. Hell, I mean, they almost won with Brissett only playing a half. Now, granted, that is an assumption, but I feel pretty confident in that assumption. The fact that Joe Douglas mailed in this season enabled losing from the get-go, from week 2, really from that Tuesday after the Bills game, threw his hands up and said, Rodgers is done. Guess what? So am I. We're not making any moves on the offensive line. We're not going to help out at wide receiver. We're not going to get a veteran quarterback. We're not going to be proactive at all. The season's over. That's, maybe he feels that way. Maybe he doesn't. But you know what? The facts, the results, the lack of moves indicate that he mailed in the season. So, pretty disappointing stuff. I'm happy that the Jets got the win. I'm so pumped for Garrett Wilson. I'm pumped for Simeon too. Again, he was ineffective pretty much the majority of the day, but you know what? It must feel pretty good to go out there and get a win. Obviously he's not a starting quarterback or anything like that, and he's bounced around from team to team, but he could go out there and say, hey, you know what? Like, I led the Jets on a comeback win at the end of the game. Like, he could feel pretty good about it, right? I'm happy for when veterans, get their shot late in their career. Also, Jason Brown-Lee catching his first touchdown pass early on. That was awesome. I really, really like that play call from Hackett. Breece Hall looking really good. Quincy Williams looking really good. Jermaine Johnson. The young core players are out there doing their thing, but it's not just the implosion, the second half implosion from this coaching job. How do we look on third downs? Awful. How did we look in the penalty department? Awful. The Jets were flagged 14 times for 150 yards. One full football field and a half. You mean to tell me, like, you just gave the opposition in your house in MetLife Stadium a free field and a half, flagged 14 times, all the stoppages. It felt like the clock was getting stopped, or the game was just dragging on because of how many stoppages there were because of penalties. It does not go away. This team is just not well coached. It's one of the worst coached teams in football. I love Jeff Ulbrich. I love Boyer, but as far as Hackett and Saleh go, it's just an undisciplined football team, and some were ticky-tack. But at the end of the day, the Jets are flagged like this. Not like this, but they're flagged, at an excessive amount weekly. And again, I understand that the Jets have injuries. I understand that we're playing, we're down to QB number, Rodgers, Wilson, Boyle. So we're on QB 4. I understand all these things, but I mean, this is the NFL. You don't blow a 20-point lead. And it goes back to what we were saying in previous videos. Do you seriously, in your heart of hearts, trust, assuming the Jets are good next season, Rodgers stays healthy, this and that, we have a better offensive line. In your heart of hearts, do you trust Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett to outcoach any coach in the playoffs? Like a cold weather game in Baltimore. Do you trust Hackett to out-scheme John Harbaugh? No. Do you trust Saleh and Hackett to out-scheme Mike McDaniel? No, they haven't been able to do that. This season, they were blown out by the Dolphins 2 times. What about Andy Reid? What about Zach Taylor? What about Kevin Stefanski? Sean McDermott? I mean, the list is Mike Tomlin. I hate to say this because he's a rookie head coach, Shane Steichen. There's a lot of coaches in the AFC that you just kind of, personally, I can't speak for anybody else, you kind of feel better about. I would much rather roll with Reid and Harbaugh and, some of these other coaches, Stefanski, in the playoffs over Nathaniel Hackett and Robert Saleh. So they're coming back next season. It just feels like the Jets have one statement, and they're hanging the entire state of the franchise on it. We hope that Aaron Rodgers is healthy. And that's it. That's the plan. Rodgers is healthy, and he's going to carry us to the Lombardi Trophy. So I don't know how bulletproof of a plan that is. I'm not subscribing to that idea. I want to build the offensive line. I want to load the offensive line up so much to where Breece Hall is looking like this every week, to where the quarterback has time to throw and get Garrett Wilson the football, get the tight ends the football, right? Quarterbacks for the New York Jets were sacked, or they're sacked the third highest in the NFL. We're awful in the running game, again, outside of today. But then I guess you could kind of push back at me and say, hey, you know what, man? Yeah, the Jets did look pretty good, but it was the 32nd ranked defense in the Washington Commanders. But you know what? The Jets got the win. We're 6-9. Christmas is tomorrow. Today's Christmas Eve. A lot of guys had great games. Again, I'm happy for Simeon, pumped for Zuerlein, Brownlee, Breece, Garrett Wilson, all the defensive players that we were talking about before. So, I'll take the win. As far as like the draft position goes, obviously this does not help. But at the end of the day, do you trust Joe Douglas to make the right selection? Do you trust, the Jets to land that player and him to develop well under Nathaniel Hackett? These are quite assuming that we go offense, right? These are fair, realistic questions that need to be asked. This is an NFL organization, $1 billion organization. We have to have faith. We have to have trust in the people running the show. If we don't, there is an issue. And right now, I'm looking at these coaching performances. I'm looking at the issues, the penalties, the third downs, the red zone, all these different problems. Not, specifically just today, but just throughout the course of the season. The lack of moves, the lack of urgency, the lack of leadership, lack of accountability. It makes me a little uncomfortable moving forward. Like, I got to be honest. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it or anything like that and say, oh, you know what, the season is saved and Saleh is a top coach in football based off of this win. I'm not going to go down that path here. I'm just being 100% transparent on how I feel about the current state of this team. So we have a lot of issues that need to be worked out before 2024 arrives. Personally, it's that offensive line. That's my number one priority this offseason if I'm Joe Douglas. I know he's going to say that. I know there's going to be an emphasis on it. And we can look at the last 4 years and say, you've been saying this for 4 years and it's still not done. What really is going to change this go round? That's a fair question. But to be honest with you, I'm pouring all my assets into the offensive line. I'm talking, I want 5 good starters. AVT coming back, Joe Tippmann starting at center. I need a new left tackle. I probably would move on from Laken Tomlinson. I need a new right tackle. And then behind those guys, I need solid backups. I need backups that could come in and look like starters. I know it sounds like I'm asking for a lot, but this is like if you trade all your, if you make a crazy trade, right, with the Green Bay Packers and you land Aaron Rodgers with just a couple of years left at 40 years old, you need to improve the offensive line. It's just inexcusable if you don't. Again, I know it sounds like I'm asking for a lot. Not many teams have a bulletproof offensive line and then fantastic backups, but some teams do. It's doable. It can be done. So we'll see how it plays out. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. And as always, thanks so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. Merry Christmas. And as always, go Jets.